Welcome, everybody, to the Only Podcast special mid-tournament edition. This is Chris Vannini, your host, and I'm joined today by Adam Ruff, the former Spartan Sports Network producer and analyst, because Austin, as you know if you're listening to the last podcast, is at a bachelor party in Florida. So he's up having I'm sure he's wearing his MSU gear around, I think it was Fort Lauderdale area, so I'm sure all the Miami fans there are
he's having fun.
Are getting a taste of that or something. So this will be a somewhat shorter podcast. We'll talk about Miami, we'll talk about Kansas, and kind of go from there. So last night, one of the worst starts you'll ever see in a basketball game, yet it maybe finished as the best performance of the season for this MSU team, a 20-point win over Miami after starting off down 10-0 and 17-5. They end up winning 78-58. Outside of the start, about nothing went wrong. It was almost a near perfect performance after that start. Adam, your just first reactions after that game?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've ever seen the stark contrast. I mean, because like you said, that first 8 minutes was hopeless. I mean, it didn't even look like they wanted to be there. I mean, it was just mind-boggling to see. And the funny thing was, though, when I think back to it now, is that it kind of seemed like, you know, Miami was playing well to start, but Michigan State just wasn't doing anything about it. They were completely indifferent. And once Jim Larrañaga went from that matchup zone and they went back to the man-to-man defense, and Cassius Winston got going and the team got going a little bit. I mean, it was completely strange, and I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in the contrast of what happened in a single game.
You know, going into that, I was looking at some. I was watching some old MSU tournament highlights in the past couple of days. And there were some games like in that 2015 Final Four run where they were down 10 points and came back to win, whether it was like the Oklahoma game or the Kansas game in 2009. And so that ended up happening. But you know what the start reminded me of was the Middle Tennessee game a year ago. Because last year, Middle Tennessee starts off, I think, 17-2 or something like that. Just completely blitzed MSU out the gate. And MSU, I don't know if they ever got the lead back. But the difference here was that Miami didn't make every crazy shot, and MSU did play better defense. And, you know, I said at the beginning of the game that the keys were going to be turnovers, perimeter defense, ward and Bridges out of foul trouble, and get on a fast break. And 2 seconds into the game, Nick Ward gets a foul. The perimeter D is very bad, and Miami drives to the hoop. They have like 6 turnovers or 5 turnovers in just a few minutes, and they got no fast break. So everything that they needed to do right, they couldn't do. But it turned around from there. Ward didn't pick up another foul until 5 minutes to go in the game. MSU only had like 2 or 3 turnovers the rest of the way up until maybe that full court press at the end. Bridges never got into foul trouble, and they had enough on the fast break that they were able to speed up the game more than I think Miami is used to. So they ended up hitting all of those keys. And who would you say was your player of the game? Is it who I think it's going to be?
Well, probably not. I mean, and the reason I'm not going to say Nick Ward is because he's kind of become a steady force. I mean, he probably is a player of the game, honestly. But I was kind of concerned at halftime. I thought, you know what, they blitzed Miami right back, and I thought, you know, the best thing that could have happened for Miami was halftime. And you know, with a bunch of young players, they thrive on momentum and confidence, emotion. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And out of halftime, Joshua Langford put an end to that. Michigan State had that first possession. It was a pretty bad possession. And he flew in from the perimeter for that offensive rebound above everybody else, got it, put it back in, and then he hit, you know, a couple long twos and then that three-pointer. I think he had 9 of the first 11 points in the second half.
Yeah.
And so to me, Joshua Langford sealed that game. And to me, that was more important things about the game, because you didn't know how they were going to respond after halftime, especially against a pretty they have a couple seniors who are the best players for Miami, and then a bunch of freshmen pretty much. So I kind of give it to Joshua Langford because he was an X factor coming into the game, and I think he was the player of the game for really sealing the game.
It's interesting. There was a time maybe early in Big Ten play or middle of the year where a lot of people said, and we said on the podcast, was, what is Josh Langford's role? What does he provide? Where does he fit? He never seemed to fit in there. And then he found his shooting touch, and he has been such a weapon on the outside, and crashing the glass for a handful of offensive rebounds over the past few weeks too. And yeah, he hits a couple of long twos. He hits some threes right off the bat, and that put the game away. They're 10-point lead at halftime, but they come out in the second half and push it to 20, and then that was about it. And it kind of just went back and forth from there. So that was, Langford was, I think, a very important key. But I think if I had to pick a player of the game, I'm going to go with Nick Ward. 19 points on 8 for 9 shooting, 7 rebounds, only 1 turnover, 3 offensive boards, 3 for 3 on free throws. And just the game just changed when they put him back in. And early on in that bad start, first Ward picks up the foul, and you're like, that is the worst possible thing that can happen to MSU right now, because anytime that Ward gets in foul trouble, they struggle. And so Izzo ended up pulling him out not long after that, and Miami went on the run. And you're just like, where is Nick Ward here? You as much as Izzo likes Kenny Goins' defense, you have to have points. It was back to what Austin and I talked about in the last podcast as it relates to lineups and why Nick Ward wasn't playing so much. But he goes back in the game and starts to go on that run and starts drawing fouls. He drew at least 6 fouls. He drew 2 right off the bat when he got back in the game. And he was just peak Nick Ward there. And he ended up finishing with 26 minutes, which, let me look up his game by game stats, because that feels like the most he's had in a long time.
Yeah, I mean he's
averaging. His 26 minutes are the most since the Maryland game, but it's also his second most since the game at Penn State. So.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, I mean, he's had the last 7 games, he's averaging about 18 points and 10 rebounds a game, if you can believe that. And he's doing it in right around 21 minutes a game. I mean, that's incredible to me.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's a beast, and he really, I don't think he's completely scratched the surface of who he is yet. I mean, totally. I mean, I'm sure he'll develop an outside jump shot, or, a 10, 15-foot jump shot eventually, which he will need, I would think, at the NBA level.
I don't know if he ever will, but I don't know if he needs it, maybe he doesn't. But I think what's so good about him, and we've said it a lot, but just as a freshman, his footwork and his touch, he's always in position. He leads the nation in fouls drawn per 40 minutes because he's always in the right spot. He always knows how to leverage his body and everything and get the opponent off guard. And he had, 8 for 9 shooting, and some of those were very tough shots. Some of those were falling down or getting or kind of on the move, and he was at his absolute best.
Yeah, I mean, and the way he contorts his body too, I think he does that sometimes to kind of try to draw fouls too. The way he flails, and he still makes them when he flails. I mean, it is incredible. I mean, if he gets the ball on the rim, whether it's because of his touch, it gives him the extra English. It kind of deadens the ball on the rim where it always, falls through. I mean, it's incredible what he does. I mean, that Maryland game was kind of one of his worst games shooting percentage-wise, but outside of that, I mean, he's almost automatic within 5 feet, which is incredible. And now he's hitting his free throws too. He only shot 3 last night, but I mean, that was probably Michigan State's best free throw shooting game of the season too, and 12 of 14 with this team. That doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, and another thing about Ward, not only is he drawing the fouls, but since the Michigan game on February 7th, he's shooting 72% from the free throw line. compared to up to that point, he had been shooting 55%. So he's become he's become a weapon. It's no longer, you foul Ward and he's gonna make one or two or miss both. He's making them now, and that's just such another big weapon, especially considering how bad this MSU team was at free throws entering the year. They kind of cleaned that up toward the end, actually, and so. Yeah,
and if Bridges and Ward are making there, since they shoot, it seems like they shoot all of them. I mean, if they're starting to make them, that percentage is going to get a lot better. But I do want to say one more thing about Nick Ward. I think last night we saw maybe a very good sign from him on the intangible side. After that last Minnesota game where everyone thought he should have played more, except for the coaches. Even Nick Ward was saying, I have no idea why I didn't play more. And so he and, Izzo and the coaching staff were at odds of how he played defensively in that Minnesota game. And Nick was obviously frustrated like the fans were. But I think the good thing is he worked on it. He was very good on those high pick and roll screens last night. And so it shows that he can take the coaching on top of the skill he already has, which – if that's the case, he's got a good attitude like that. If that's the case, I mean, he's only going to get better. That was obviously a good sign and will be needed again on Sunday.
Yeah, he played the ball screens about as well as he did at the home game against Michigan, where that was also a key. It's kind of like Derek Nix in that sense, in that, you have to really, really commit to defending those ball screens every single time. And Nix did later in his career, and Ward has so far. So let's talk about a guy who maybe kind of quietly nearly had another double-double, and Miles Bridges, 18 points, 9 rebounds, was 8 for 12 shooting, 3 assists, a couple of dunks, 2 for 4 from deep. Most interesting I thought about him, he took several threes early on when Miami was in that zone, and MSU did not know what to do with it. And then Izzo, sounds like, got in his face about shooting so many threes. And later on in the half, he has an open three in the wing, pump fakes, takes it in, hits a long 2. Next possession, he's got a 3 near the top, pump fakes, drives, and gets a layup. And it's like, that's what Miles Bridges can do. And that's why a lot of times we've talked about in the past about him settling for 3-pointers and maybe falling in love with 3-pointers and not maybe running the defense or running the offense as much. And I think you all right over there?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. It was just some crackling going on.
Oh, sorry.
I think we saw fully what Miles Bridges can do in all aspects last night. What did you think of his performance?
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, when you're as good as he is on a consistent basis, I mean, it's almost like you don't think about him at the end of the game because he did what he's supposed to do. I mean, and what you're used to. And to me, that's a sign of a great player right there when you don't notice him because he's just consistently great. And, I do think, the frustration showed. I mean, think about that. He hit the first points after Michigan State was down. He hit that 1 3-pointer. And then he missed his next couple, and he was 1 for 3. And he was just, he was frustrated. And that's what frustrated young players do. They, okay, well, I'm just going to try to make it because we're just turning the ball over anyways. And he was taking the quick shots. But yeah, from that point on, he, made 7 of his last 9 shots in the game. And I think he slowed it down. You could tell the game got really fast for the team, which can happen a lot in pressure situations for anybody, let alone freshmen. He was incredible. And you think 12 shots, it seemed like it was midway through the second half. Michigan State's up 20 whatever points, and he had 8 or 9 shots. And to me, that's incredible development from this team when he can have that few shots. I mean, you probably want him between 12 and 15 shots a game, which will tell you he's at peak performance or peak efficiency probably. You're not using him too much. He's not settling too much. And it means other guys are doing their thing. So, that was about as efficient of a game as he can play. And those freshmen, man, they were pretty good. They only had 2 turnovers between them. And Oh, you just think, man, Miles, if you're here one more year, man, just think what they could look like next year.
Yeah, so you mentioned the turnovers. They actually mostly came from the veterans. Two from Goins, two from Nairn, three from Ellis, and McQuaid had three. Although I think most of those were at the end. All right, who else do you want to talk about? We got Ellis had a kind of an all-around game. Nairn played pretty good defense. Wasn't as big a factor as he normally is. Cassius Winston had a Cassius Winston game. Matt McQuaid provided some. Of those four, I mean, everybody played well on this team in this game. Who else, of those four, maybe who do you think stuck out?
Yeah, well, Elvin Ellis, he was the epitome of the contrast of the poor start and the great finish. I mean, he was terrible. I mean, he was awful.
Yeah, he had 3 turnovers right off the bat.
And he didn't get credited with the fourth when he vacated the middle when Kenny Goins was trying to pass the ball back to him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was mind-blowing, but that's the enigma of Elvin Ellis. But I thought Matt McQuaid, man, he hasn't had many good stat games since the Wisconsin game, but he's been confident since that Wisconsin game. And with him, that's the important part. I mean, 7 points, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists. I know he had those 3 turnovers, which a couple of them I know came late when they were pressing. But, I mean, that's about as good as you can get out of him. And that's what you need out of him if you want to be successful, especially in the tournament. So I thought Matt McQuaid, Cassius Winston, I thought that's kind of what we should expect out of him from this point. And he doesn't deliver it, but that's kind of how he should play, in my estimation. But Matt McQuaid really, I thought, stuck out as, the best among that second group of guys outside of Bridges and Ward and Langford as the guy that really made a big difference. As a little bit bigger of a guard, he went and got the rebounds. And that's key to starting a fast break, too, when the ball goes to your side of the court.
Yeah.
So I thought Matt McQuaid was one of the stars of the game, definitely.
I'll go with Cassius Winston. And, one guy who did kind of have some foul trouble in the first half was Nairn. And Winston came in and played much of that first half, and he was the guy in when they made the big run. And he finishes with 5 assists, no turnovers, as he is. He's still – let me see if he's still second. He is – still second in the country in assist rate, 46.4, which is a higher assist rate than Denzel Valentine had last year.
Wow.
And he goes 1 for 3 from deep, 2 for 2 at the line, 2 for 5 from the game, 1 rebound. So just kind of a very solid Cassius Winston game, I think, setting everybody up around him. And he played pretty good defense as well, because that part of that run that MSU made was a big part of that was because of the defense. And they forced a bunch of Miami turnovers. And Winston was a part of that. He was credited with MSU's only steal as well. So
yeah, and I do, in fact, I know he at least got 2 hockey assists. I know that doesn't mean much in basketball, but that one fast break, especially probably the best fast break run this season by Michigan State, where he got the ball pushed up to half court, went over to the wing to Ellis, and one more bounce pass. It was 2 bounce passes, no dribbles.
That was very pretty.
Half court in. I mean, that was incredible. So I guess you got to give Ellis credit too, because his pass was probably better than Cassius's. But I mean, he did more than the 5 assists, I thought, too, with his passing. And his fast break pushing too.
Yeah. So I don't know what the final numbers were, but Winston and Ward and Bridges had incredible plus minuses, I know, at halftime and then by the end of the game. And Izzo said he wanted to. It was time to take the diapers off a bit, and it didn't totally seem like that with him pulling Ward early and Nairn still starting. But by the end, the freshman carried the team to the end, and that's what's you got to unleash them at this point. Let's see what they can do. Did you see a performance like this coming at all? Did you think it was possible? I think it was the best performance they've had all year. So I think this was them maxing out at their potential that we thought they could have, at least outside of the first 8 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think I would have seen something quite this good. And, the way they played against Penn State in the Big Ten tournament was one thing and looked really good. And then they faltered off. So it seems like they're in a kind of a rut where they're good one game, not nearly as good the next game. So I thought maybe they'd play a little bit better, but yeah, I mean, this was peak performance from their freshmen, which is going to be hard to replicate again, that's for sure. But the good thing is with these guys, you know, you get confidence. You don't know what can happen with freshmen because they're emotional guys. And I like the quote from Miles Bridges after the games that, you know, playing against Josh Jackson, I'm not here to, you know, hang out with my friends. I'm here to win, which is good, especially in this day and age of the NBA where everybody's best friends just about, unless you're Draymond Green. So, you know, they've got a chance to do, you know, some good things again, but that was completely unexpected the way they played, I thought.
I think it's the kind of performance that gives you a lot of hope and excitement for the next year. I mean, we knew this MSU team was going to be. I know they started in the top 15 or something like that, but that was always a little tricky because they weren't going to have Gavin Schilling and Ben Carter, and you knew that was going to be a problem. If you include those guys, maybe this is the top 25 team, but when you take out your only two centers, you know, I think you look back at the preseason ranking to where they are now and say, oh, maybe they didn't live up to expectations. But I think the expectation has changed when Schilling and Carter went out, and then it was a whole big question mark because you knew you'd be relying on so many freshmen. So to get a tournament win and to get one in such dominating fashion, I think is one that kind of, you know, makes you feel like they're going to have something next year, as opposed to if they had lost this game, if they had got blown out based on the way they started, you'd come in saying, you know, you'd go into the offseason saying, I don't know, is Bridges going to leave now? I don't know, a lot is up in the air. I think now you saw the max, but by the end of this year now, you have seen the best performance this team can give. The whole thing was about potential. You've now seen that potential and know what they can be, whether or not Bridges is back next year. So I think Graham Couch, I think, wrote a good column about it. It's not like a program win or you know, a big changing win, but it's a I think he worded it as a team win. It's such a confidence booster, I think, for this team, and because you judge MSU teams based on how they do in March, and if this would have been a first round exit, it would have been looked down upon as one of Izzo's worst seasons in that 20-year stretch. So at least to get one win out of the way there, I think is big. And so that sets you up now with Kansas, number 1 seed. Whooped UC Davis in the 116 game. Initial thoughts on Kansas. They're a really good shooting team. They're actually a bit underseeded or overseeded if you just based on KenPom. That they're number 9 overall in KenPom, yet they're number 1 seed. But this is a team that's better on the offensive end than the defensive end. They're a really good shooting team, and they're a pretty good offensive rebounding team. They're really good from 3. They shoot 40% as a team. That's number 5 in the country. They're, like I said, pretty good at offensive rebounding. They're not good at the free throw line. They're kind of average when it comes to turnovers, and they play a pretty fast pace, number 64 in the country in total pace. Defensively, they're 28th in defensive efficiency, not great at anything. They're pretty good at two-point defense, number 26 in the country, but just kind of a pretty good defensive team. They're led by Frank Mason, averages 20.8 points per game, shoots 48% from 3. He's their go-to guy and everything there. And then again, the freshman Josh Jackson, 16 points a game. He shoots 38% from 3. Devonte Graham also shoots 38% from 3, 13 points per game. So those are their big 3 guys. Those are those are all guard. Oh no, I'm sorry. Jackson's 6'8", but Mason's 5'11", Graham's 6'2". As a team, Kansas is number 104. So you've got Carlton Bragg, 6'10" on the inside. So kind of a team that is based on some comments from Izzo. He seems to think MSU matches up pretty well against Kansas. So we'll see on that. But Adam, did you get a chance to see any of Kansas? Do you have any thoughts on Kansas this year?
Yeah, I think they're a weird team. I mean, for a team that's 29-4, you know, you read a lot of the numbers. they don't seem nearly as dominant as their record indicates. And I know Graham Couch has been one of those guys that keeps saying they're overvalued, and I agree with that to an extent, but you don't go 29-4 for no reason. But the matchups, I think it works pretty well for Michigan State, just for the simple fact of the size of Kansas's guards. It helps Michigan State. The Spartans struggle with big wings, but of course, you got Josh Jackson and then Zvi Mikhailuk, who are both 6'8", and they're both perimeter players. So those guys will obviously be an issue. But from the aspect of Frank Mason and Devontae Graham, I think their size is advantageous to Michigan State. But the problem is, they got four guys that shoot over 38% from 3-point range. And, Michigan State gives up a lot of open looks out there, as we've seen all year. So, but, when you look at their schedule, they in Big 12 play, they obviously won again and were strong, but they didn't dominate. They played a ton of close games.
Yeah, on the year, it looks like they're on the whole season, they were 11-3 in games decided by 6 points or less.
I mean, and we're talking close games at home with like Texas Tech, Oklahoma, teams like that didn't even make the tournament. TCU, then obviously they lost to TCU again in the tournament without Josh Jackson. But they're definitely a team that's not, unbeatable, even though 4 losses on the season would probably indicate that. And so who knows what's going to happen? I'm sure Kansas will probably still win, and maybe by a healthy margin. But you got to think Michigan State has a chance, and especially in the tournament and with all those things that Izzo does, that makes him great in March. You never know.
One thing, this is not a deep team. They have 6 guys who play at least 24 minutes. 3 guys go over 30 minutes. It looks like as Azubuike is injured, he's only played 11 games. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, it looks like about a 7-man rotation here.
Yep, Vic and Bragg off the bench pretty much is it. Yep.
Yeah.
And Bragg is only 14 minutes a game. So
yeah. So they're number 327 in bench minutes, while MSU I think is number 1. So it's a game where but it's a Kansas team that likes to run too. So I don't know if running and tiring them out is exactly a plan. But if Ward can get someone in foul trouble down low, I think would obviously be a huge factor for that. To me, it's going to come down to perimeter defense as always, especially with the way Kansas shoots from the outside. Turnovers, as always, and then probably hit some shots from the outside if you're MSU.
And one of the things I've noticed from Kansas is they're a very emotional team. What I mean by that is, in a lot of games I've watched, when they're going well, they get that swagger going, but when they're, and they get that look on their faces.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when they're not doing, and when they're in a close game, that swagger isn't on their faces, and they struggle a lot more. So I think if you keep it close, obviously you have the chance, but if you maybe get a little bit of a lead and make it tough on them, I think they can get frustrated easily, which I've seen at times when they're not playing as well. But then, that Graham hits an off-balance three-pointer. They shoot the ball extremely well to get them back in it. But I think they're kind of an emotional team where if you take some of the positive emotion from them, you can take a little bit of heart out of them. And so maybe opening up the game and running is good for Michigan State, because when Michigan State's more free-flowing, they play a lot better than when they get stuck in the half court, as we all know. So Kansas wanting to push the ball could be advantageous for Michigan State as well, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I admittedly haven't seen a ton of Kansas this year. So when you have a 7-man rotation, theoretically you want to run and kind of tire them out, but they seem to run at that, in which case, again, if Ward can draw guys in the fouls, I think that would be huge. Basically, just MSU has to not do the things that they've been bad at this year, and that's mostly perimeter D and turnovers, and then hit the outside shots when they are there. So, by the way, game, if you don't know, is at 5:15 Sunday, 5:15 Eastern Sunday on CBS. Tom Izzo is 21-4 on the second game of a weekend. However, 3 of those losses are to number 1 seeds, with Texas in the 2003 Elite Eight, North Carolina in the 2007 second round, North Carolina in the 2009 title game, and then UConn was like a 7 or 8 or 9 or something in 2014 at Madison Square Garden in the Elite Eight there. So KenPom has MSU losing by 7, 74% chance of a Kansas win. What is your prediction? I think if MSU plays like they played in the first 8 minutes of that Miami game, this thing will be over by halftime. If they play like they played after that, I think they got a real shot. But this has been an up and down team all year.
Yeah, don't know what you're going to get. I would tend to think between 8 and 12 points are going to lose by. You just never know. I don't know if Miles Bridges completely knew that Josh Jackson was going to Kansas, even though he said he knew for a few weeks or a couple of weeks where he's going.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Josh Jackson here. That was we can hit on that for a sec. That was that was a weird thing. I forgot who it was who had the shirt that said Jackson, Winston, Bridges, Langford, Ward, and had all the freshmen on there. It's a big case of what if Jackson had come to MSU. And what would this? I mean, if Jackson's on this team, if Schilling and Carter are on this team, this season is a big what if for MSU, and to have a matchup with Josh Jackson, I think is a kind of fitting because it's kind of the ultimate what if with this team.
And I think it's good too. I mean, I think it is a motivating factor, especially for young players, and maybe even Izzo, because I know Izzo. Before I was done working with the team, man. He was getting really frustrated with recruiting. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if it was going to make him retire because he's getting so sick of the games. And I don't know how much of a game there was played with Josh Jackson, but with he and, even Caleb Swanigan, those type of things, I think those are motivating factors. I mean, we've seen how long Tom Izzo's held on to the Chris Webber stuff. I mean, so even for Coach Izzo, and I think that can play a factor with some young players too. So I anything like that can help, but that's going to be interesting for me to see what happens between Miles Bridges and Josh Jackson, because they're going to be guarding each other.
Yeah, and we're not alleging anything went on
right
his recruitment, but it was after he committed to Kansas, I think his mother was the only one to talk about it for a while, and his mother seemed to kind of be a driving force behind things. But he's a heck of a player. He is dealing with some. He was recently suspended. There's allegations that he threatened a women's basketball player or her car or something like that.
He kicked in her car, put dents in her car, and then this last one was apparently he put a dent in somebody's car in the parking lot and drove off or something like that.
So who knows where his Kansas has had a couple of off-field things going on. So. You talk about an emotional team. Who knows where their kind of mind is with all that? But on the court, I think it could be an interesting matchup. I think Miami was a bit of a coming out party for the freshmen together. This is an opportunity to do the other one. And this MSU team has not been the Fab Five that a lot of a lot of MSU fans wondered if they had their own kind of. Fab Five here with the freshmen, and maybe if you add Josh Jackson into it, it's something different. But something also to keep in mind with the Michigan team, the first Michigan team, they were a 6th seed when they reached the Final Four, so that was kind of their coming out party late. And if MSU is able to beat Kansas, I think that'll just really shoot the projections for this team and for the players through the roof for next year and into the future. But I think I'm with you. I think MSU keeps it close in the first half, maybe even leads at halftime, but maybe kind of fizzles out at the end, maybe a 10-point loss. Kind of thinking about the 2007 North Carolina game when that overmatched MSU team stayed around for a while, but kind of just ran out of juice by the end. So that's what I think we'll go from there. So is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, just, I kept thinking after how tough it's been for the basketball team and obviously the football team, if for one day at least, things felt a little bit normal for Michigan State fans. And I think that was good to have that. And even, you talk about all these Izzo things, one of the underlooked aspects of what he's done or under talked about things. I mean, 20 straight appearances, and he's made it past the first round 16 times. I mean, that no matter who you have on your team, that's a tough thing to do to make to that round of 32, because anything can happen, as we've seen. And to never lose in the first round twice, we take these things for granted as, people who've been around Michigan State for their entire lives. I mean, it's incredible what they've done. And so you go, well, maybe that 21-4 thing will help even with this team. You never know what can happen with that in the month of Izzo, as they say. So regardless, it should be fun. It's almost like there's nothing to lose now.
Yeah.
What's happened this season, you're living on borrowed time. So, hey, who knows? It could have a little bit more fun.
Yeah, go and enjoy it. And I think also Izzo 14-10 as the lower seed already had the record for wins as a lower seed. But yeah, I think maybe coming off of the Middle Tennessee loss, don't take any tournament game for granted. Make sure you enjoy it because it may be an entire year till you get another one, or longer if you happen to miss a tournament. But don't just enjoy it. I think FSU's playing with house money here at this point. I think they've set themselves in a position where you can really look forward to what they're going to be next year with or without Miles Bridges, and and now they have a showcase. This MSU team has had a lot of showcase games. They had Arizona, Kentucky, I guess kind of Baylor and Duke, and they lost in all three of them. And maybe that affects them coming into this game where they don't come in.
And really, you look at those. Only one of those, the Kentucky game, is where they were completely outclassed.
Yeah,
The Duke game, they were close until a couple calls went their way, and the freshmen kind of went. It bothered them.
Yeah, late in the second half, and Arizona was buzzer beater. So
they very well could have won that game. At the end. So I mean, it's not like they've been outclassed. They were leading Baylor for the entire first half, up by double figures. So they've got that to look back on too for some confidence.
This is the kind of game where I think the Izzo scheduling maybe affects their mindset coming in. Where, they've played against the best of the best, and they know what they have to do and what they can't do, and we'll see what happens. So, all right, anything else you want to touch?
For me, Chris, I appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, thanks for being on. We'll have another one next week with Austin, maybe Adam. We'll see how it goes and who's available. But thanks, guys, for listening to this short that went longer than I expected podcast. But I wanted to hit one after the Miami game and after there was a win to talk about. So we will talk to you guys next week. And thanks a lot for listening. See you.